October the 10th. And that means if it's Tuesday and it's 10 a.m., it's time to track the tropics. From Central Florida, I'm West 2 meteorologist Eric Burris.
And in Savannah, Georgia, from WJCL 22, I'm Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson.
So, Jeremy, we don't have any big threats to your area or my area right now, which is great news. But that doesn't mean that the tropics are just sitting quiet doing nothing out there.
Yeah, we have a couple of invests. I know the one way out in the Atlantic, it seems like we've been kind of showing that area of interest on TV. That's the one with the percent chance on it, way out there. And then in the Gulf of Mexico, we have sort of a broad area of low pressure that may get going. And I think at least for my area, that thing is going to be a net positive because we really need rain across southeast Georgia and the low country. So this could be a good rainmaker for us, but obviously we're kind of watching to see if it'll turn tropical.
Yeah, so right now it's been tagged Invest 93 from the National Hurricane Center. You can kind of see the overall bubble up of moisture down there in the southern Gulf of Mexico, the Bay of Campeche. And I think just looking at all the models, there is no question that this is going to deepen as an area of low pressure. It's going to spread and make a whole bunch of rain. But the big question, at least in terms of the forecast, is does this try to make a run for a tropical something, Jeremy?
Yeah, right now 30% chance of development, and even though it said we look at that and it says like next 2 days, next 7 days, it's really going to happen in probably the next like 60 hours or so.
Right.
If it's going to develop, because this is something that will start bumping into land middle part of this week.
Yeah, so computer forecast models are in pretty good agreement with this northerly and then eventually kind of northeasterly trek, but it's going to bring a whole lot of rain first to my area, and then Jeremy up to your area. You said it's a net positive. We certainly could use some rain as well, but we've also been noticing the computer models kind of edging more and more to the right, including our own IBM or Futurecast model.
Yeah, and overall that one is very good. We feel like short term with tropical systems, or just kind of short in with lows in the Gulf or off the southeast coast. And that one, what you're looking at right now are some winds, so you can kind of take that away. You were checking this out earlier.
Yeah, so the one thing, we're definitely not seeing this turning into a big bad hurricane. So that's the most important thing, I think, to mention. But starting to see some of those kind of orangish, deepish red, even brown colors, which on the sliding scale shows 60 to 70 mile per hour winds. So could we be talking about a weak mess of a system that's producing gusty winds? I think that that's probably the most likely scenario. A non-tropical, subtropical, extratropical, just nasty storm system that comes in, brings a lot of rainfall and some gusty winds at times.
Yeah, those winds, especially offshore, could kind of start to ramp up a bit. I don't know, onshore, maybe tropical storm force if you're right along the coast. Yeah. Maybe some gusts head upwards of 40 miles per hour. For southeast Georgia, we really have not had much rain since Idalia, and that was back in late August. So we really need some rain. Some models are giving us like 2, 3, maybe 4 inches of rain. And for our area, as long as that doesn't fall in the span of an hour or two, that will probably be good news.
Yeah, so there it is over the next few hours, kind of lifting up to the north, and then notice it more northeast, but there's that spread of moisture from Florida all the way through the deep south. These next couple of days are going to end up to be very wet for us, and I think that our rain chances, at least in my area, 60, 70, even 80% coverage, and I would imagine it's going to probably be fairly close to that as well for your area, Jeremy.
Yeah, and you have that warm front drawn in. This is something we talked about kind of before we got started here. I was like, I wonder if there'll be any severe weather. I don't think for my area. It looks like our winds stay mainly northeast, and just really no instability here, just a big rainmaker. But down in your area, we were talking about maybe there will be a line of thunderstorms.
Yeah. I think that we'll probably get some decent storms, especially because our temperatures are going to be in the upper 80s and lower 90s. And so you combine that with this rich tropical moisture, at the very least, it's letting us know that the atmosphere sets up for severe weather. And then whether or not that happens in this particular case, I think that going forward in time, between watching this evolution, Jeremy, and then understanding that we're in this El Nino pattern where the jet stream likes to be a bit further south, come winter and spring, both your area and my area have to be very cognizant of that, because those big, powerful storm systems move in, and at least for us in the deep south, that means the threat of severe weather and a heightened concern for tornadoes.
Yeah, that's one thing that we probably favor with an El Nino in the winter is a little higher chance of severe weather parts of Florida, maybe the southeast or right along the Gulf Coast. And obviously, for anyone that follows these updates that we provide weekly, our long range forecast method, this is something probably one of the first things that we have seen so far in what's likely the new pattern, as we kind of term it here, as we're into the fall season.
Yeah.
It's something that we'll watch closely, and it's something that definitely could be a factor come next hurricane season.
Yeah. So talking really quickly about that, Jeremy. So when we look at developing our long range forecasting, okay, this was all the lows that we had kind of established from last year's weather pattern. And this year, because we are now starting things off, here's your first kind of look at where we're at. There's today. That's the first. It's kind of dusting off the map and adding the first area of low pressure. And so what we're going to do is day by day track where this low goes and where all the other lows go over the next couple of months until we kind of start to see things repeating, and that gives us an idea of storm systems for wintertime, and then, of course, hotspots come hurricane season. And, Jeremy, you had made a suggestion to kind of do this interactively with our viewers, and I kind of love that idea.
Yeah, I mean, what they've seen in the past is our final product,
Right.
but I think now that we're doing this every Tuesday, we may as well make everyone part of our forecast as we build it along here leading up to March the 1st of 2024 when we release our hurricane season forecast. So we typically kind of start off tracking these lows once we get past the first week of October. That's a bit of a transitional period in the pattern, we think. So once we get to the 10th and beyond, definitely a newer part of the pattern. And we'll probably start to see some things that we're like, wow, that haven't seen that before. That's something new, that low. We haven't really seen lows in that area. So this will be kind of a key, I think, an early key to maybe next season.
Well, and beyond that, too, this is very different than last year. So already we're starting to see that transition play out. This very much fits the El Nino type pattern. So at the very least, we have our first clue of hurricane season next year and of winter, because it's looking very much El Nino-like, which is completely different than what we saw in 2022 heading into the 2023 cycles.
Yeah, so we have this low, and then also way out in the Atlantic, we mentioned there's another investor area of low pressure. So we probably won't put that on our map. We focus a little closer in, but it's definitely something we are noting to see how much activity is in the open Atlantic, because last fall there was quite a bit of activity out there, and then that's kind of another reason why we thought this season would be busy.
Yeah, and it absolutely has played out that way. Real fast, while you're discussing it, this is Invest 92. It does have a high likelihood, according to the National Hurricane Center, of developing over the next 2 days' time. 70% likelihood over the next 7 days' time, and 80% likelihood. Hurricane Center says depression is likely to form over the next couple of days. Good news in the forecast thinking from the computer models. It should recurve. Some of the models are kind of having it get trapped under a ridge of building high pressure and perhaps move off to the west. But for now, hopefully it stays a fish storm, doesn't bother us too much. But if it does get named, the next name on the list, Jeremy, would be Sean. And then there's only 3 more names before we run out of names this season.
Yeah, and hopefully we kind of end things with this current list. If we do run out of names, we go to that supplemental list of names, and I think Adria is the first name on that list. Right. And that list hasn't been used yet. It was created because back in 2020 we had a supersized season. We had all those storms that were Greek alphabet that we made it into there. Of course, some of those were decent hurricanes. I believe Delta was a hurricane. I think Ada down in the Caribbean was also a hurricane. So, it was busy just a few years ago. We're busy this year, but we're hoping that kind of end things here a little earlier than last year.
For sure. But, it's important to remember. It's October. We're all kind of getting into that winter mentality. Oh, the cool temperatures, the beautiful weather. But just remember one thing, okay? Looking at October, the formation zones definitely favor the deep south. The Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, water temperatures there are still very warm. And Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas, through the Gulf Coast, definitely kind of areas to watch. And when we talk about those water temperatures, Jeremy, take a look. You need 80 degrees for tropical development. And in these spots, the normal development areas this time of year, it's 88 off the coast of Jamaica. It's 85, 86 there in the central Gulf of Mexico. That's plenty of fuel to develop late season tropical systems. And Jeremy, you've got a list of storms that have actually happened during the month of October.
Yeah, we just came up on, I think it was the 5-year anniversary of Hurricane Michael, which I believe was a Cat 5, right?
Yeah, right at landfall there.
Yeah, right at landfall. And then Matthew, that swiped my area. It stayed just about 20 miles offshore, but we had a lot of tree damage around my area. And then
I need to fix this graphic, by the way.
Oh, that's all right. Well, didn't they post season?
They did, and you could tell that this hasn't been tweaked since then.
Right. So it was like kind of after the season they did their storm analysis or reanalysis, and then they were like, determined that it was a Cat 5. So at landfall initially, we thought it was a strong 4. But yeah, Matthew, that was a storm that I actually went and hung out with Eric down at Wesh, helped them out, did some live shots, and I was at WJCL for several days helping them out during that storm. So that's one that I definitely will always remember.
Yeah, and then of course the Northeast remembers Sandy, and Southwest Florida. Oh, do we remember Hurricane Wilma? And the interesting thing, if you look at climatology, October and Florida particularly are synonymous with activity. As a matter of fact, I believe climatologically speaking, October is the busiest month for Florida landfalls in sheer numbers terms. So I am also guilty of I'm excited about pumpkin spice and cool air, but we are still very much in hurricane season, and we know what happened in November of last year with Hurricane Nicole. So we still have to keep watch, and while this thing in the Gulf shouldn't be a big concern for us, it's that first kind of tick on our little tick box of things to watch for next year's hurricane season.
Yeah, and it's definitely a big one because we'll see where that low ends up moving, but remember, we start to develop our hot spots based off where these lows are tracking. And at least with this one, say our cycle duration is somewhere between like 42 and 65 days or something like that, we would probably get a couple more looks at this before we issued our hurricane season forecast.
Right.
So we'll have a good idea if, say, the low moves into the Panhandle this time, then the next time Mississippi. We'll kind of know that's the area that we'll really need to watch next season. Right.
So should we do this? Jeremy, should we take a look at the computer models, just kind of get an idea of what they're trying to say for all of this?
Yeah, definitely run it forward.
Yeah. All right. So we already showed you the FutureCast model, which is the IBM model. But let's just do this. Let's take a look at, this is the raw GFS. Okay. And we're going to just start this off right now. What you're looking at is pressure anomaly. Okay. So lowering pressures are going to be blue. Higher pressures are going to be the warmer colors. And right here, this is the GFS. Okay, this is the GFS 6Z trying to show an area of low pressure developing. And for a brief moment there, at hour 30, it shows a 998 millibar low. That's not a massive storm, Jeremy, but that's at least the model trying to say you might get a little bit of something before it kind of just becomes this big rainmaker of sorts.
Yeah, and you said, is that the GFS?
Yep, GFS 998 at 12Z on Wednesday. So you're talking tomorrow morning, basically.
Okay, so what I'm looking at here off to the side is the updated IBM model, and it looks like it may briefly get to 997 on that one.
Okay, so there's a based on that, then I would think the 2 o'clock update from the Hurricane Center, if all the models are kind of showing this, they probably up it to like a 40% likelihood of development over the next couple of days, 40-50%. What do you think?
Right. I think it kind of peaks the intensity south of Louisiana, and then it kind of hovers 999 to 1,001 or 2.
Well, and look there's the GFS, right? Like there's 998 south of Louisiana, and then it kind of skirts offshore of Louisiana as 1,001. There's 998 again, and at least the GFS into like the Panhandle area.
Yeah.
weakening, and then that piece of energy moves out. But notice what's interesting is even though that piece of energy moves out on the GFS, you still end up with kind of lowered pressure out over the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah, and I'm taking a look at this here because it gets absorbed into that front, right? I'm just trying to see exactly when that happens.
It looks like the weekend.
Okay, so here we are Tuesday, and that low's going to, let me just look at the next 2.5 days over here. So kind of looks like by Thursday morning, that's south of Louisiana, and then it moves pretty quickly. So this isn't going to be something that really lingers a long time. And then that will just move almost a little bit parallel to the Gulf Coast and then kind of turn its way northeast. So
so there it goes. It's out. Decent little storm system there Sunday, kind of just north of your area, helping to throw in some cooler air all of our direction by early next week. GFS continuing to be quiet after. Look at that mid next week, late next week, high pressure building over our entire coverage areas. And then notice the 22nd, the 23rd, the 24th, the 25th. Models are showing something along probably a front there. Something of an area of low pressure. You see that there, Jeremy, around the 00Z 25th into the 26th?
Yep. So I'll be just curious to see how many of these lows we get in, especially in the Gulf, because if we start seeing a number of lows in the Gulf, that is a huge indicator for us looking forward to next season.
Well, and I was looking at the BSR earlier, and we'll show it in a couple of minutes, but the BSR is definitely heavy in Gulf activity, whether it be kind of the north. It's like the northern Gulf and the eastern Gulf. So if this type of trend continues, I would think that that's going to be a thing. Let's look at the European very quickly here as well. Let me go back to the beginning. The European 1,000 millibars, it looks like 999 south of Louisiana on Wednesday afternoon, and then through Florida, and then look at that 987 low out past Bermuda. That's Friday the 13th. That's kind of interesting. And then if we continue it out, there's your front. If we continue it out using the control, hold on a second.
And it looks like that front makes it through Florida this weekend.
Oh yeah. But another thing to notice, this is both the GFS and the European showing something interesting around the 25th of October, 26th, 27th. The BSR has hinted at something. So there, there may be something closing in on Halloween to kind of watch in the Caribbean. Right.
Yeah, and that's by the time we get there, those waters in the Gulf, this storm coming through this week will churn things up, cool the waters down there, and it's a little tougher for those waters to start to recover back to mid-80s this time of year.
Yeah.
Once some of that warmer water gets displaced at the surface. So the warmer water will start shifting farther and farther south, and with it climatologically, the favored area for tropical development also gets pushed south. And then by the time you're in November, it's kind of that Caribbean, you're not going to see as much in the Gulf. Obviously, we had Nicole last year, but that's kind of an exception.
Yeah. All right. So this is the BSR. This is a teleconnection. Do you really want to quickly explain what this is, and then we can kind of go through it?
Yeah. So it's a little bit complex. We'll try to make this simple. You're looking, the U.S. outline there is actually an overlay that we put on top of forecast maps for a specific part of the North Pacific. So we've found that a certain area there, when projected forward, sort of those weather systems then like to kind of land over parts of Florida, the southeast, maybe the Gulf of Mexico area. So we used this a couple of weeks ago on our Tuesday Tracking the Tropics to show something in the middle part of October that would be in the Gulf, and lo and behold, that's going to happen a few days from now. So that definitely was a check the box there, that it worked out. So we'll see what happens now a little bit later this month.
Right. So watching, just developing, this is what we showed. Area of low pressure, cruising south of Louisiana, and then according to the BSR, it comes in, Mobile Bay area. But again, because it's a teleconnection, you kind of have to take it as a loose definition of the future. It just gives you a hint. So that's interesting, but playing out exactly as thought. What will be also interesting to me is there's another indicator. This is around the 17th, 18th. So a couple of days later, it'll be interesting to see if something plays out, another piece of energy in the Gulf of Mexico kind of gets thrown toward Florida. One observation, Jeremy, is that Invest 93 comes across the panhandle of Florida, what have you. The models are keeping pressures low in the Gulf. So could there be another little piece of energy that gets pulled off on a front? The BSR would have you believing the answer to that is yes.
Right. And we'll have to see how far that front drops down to the south as well. So again, this isn't if we have different tiers of sort of our forecasting tools, we're into the one now where maybe a little less confident with it. It kind of gives us an idea of something might be around.
Yep.
But it's definitely one that we try to utilize a bit because at least looking forward now, you obviously have models that might go out 10, 14 days. They're a little less reliable, so we try to fill in the blanks with other methods.
100%. And why not use a tool in our tool chest? Why buy a screwdriver if you're not going to turn the thing, All right, so there that thing goes. And the BSR has that piece of energy kind of hanging off the East Coast, which would be interesting, driving some cooler air. There's another front. And then what's kind of neat, too, is it gives you a chance to look at more than just tropical stuff. Like based on that thinking, you've got a nice little storm system cruising right along like the I-10 corridor here. That's October 10th or so. So that's like now-ish. So if you extrapolate that out, that's like the 26th, 27th of October. Could that be a part of another decent little cold front moving toward our areas around Halloween?
Yeah, we'll see. I think for sure late October, there's going to be a pretty big system in the Midwest, maybe Great Lakes area.
Yeah.
And we'll have to see if that front makes it down here. But that could be one of the first times, maybe if there's a little cold air tied to it, Northern Plains, potentially the upper Midwest or the Great Lakes could see maybe even a little bit of snow if we get that cold air wrapped in.
Yeah. And then this is kind of interesting. This caught my eye this morning. So this is using that same BSR mentality, but running it through the GFS. And there's, it's trying to throw a decent little storm system. Ignore the pressure readings because it's a teleconnection. So look at it as a kind of a blurry idea. But if that is around the 14th, 15th, you're talking November 1st, November 2nd, November 3rd. Could there be a decent storm system, tropical or not, but could there be a decent little storm system that's adding to this idea that the Gulf Coast is going to be quite active during the winter months and during the spring months and then potentially during the hurricane season months? Jeremy, what say you?
These are just clues. And what we'll do, though, if anyone's just joining us here on our chat, is we'll continue to take that map that Eric was showing and we'll build the lows. And it really becomes sort of obvious where a lot of these storm systems want to be in the new pattern, and then it helps us when we make our forecast for next year. So there's the first one, and we'll probably add in the October 11th, 12th, 13th. So if that does track to the northeast, we'll have that. And one thing of note, last year we did have lows down in this area, but they kind of stayed there or they headed up towards extreme South Texas, where this would be a little different, where it's a low and then it curves northeast. Right.
It would be very different, as a matter of fact. So that's another indicator that we're into the newer part of the weather, pattern. So that's another clue for us to watch. Real quick, I also want to just take a look at the ensembles. We didn't get a chance to do this real detailed like, and I won't spend too much time on it, but you can very clearly see this is the GFS ensemble members. Some of them are trying to close in a low, but if you look at the timeline, you kind of have to get this done in the next. That's Thursday. That's actually Wednesday, 8 p.m. So it's tomorrow night. You got to do it by then because afterward it's getting pulled over to Florida. It's meshing with a frontal boundary. So the models are trying to show that. That's the GFS. If we look at the European ensemble, just a second. Low locations. The European is trying to show something forming. That's 2 p.m. Wednesday. That's 2 a.m. Thursday, and then they kind of get spread out along a front. So you've got a very narrow window where this thing in the Gulf of Mexico, if it wants to develop, needs to do so, because afterward, Jeremy, we're out of real estate for tropical development.
Yeah, and what you're showing there when you say development is initially it's a low, and then maybe we get some tropical characteristics. We showed the winds earlier. I don't think you have to go back to that, but over the open water, likely gusts maybe 50, 60 plus miles per hour. And along the Gulf Coast, I'm sure there'll be some tropical storm force winds. But as we know, you can have those wind gusts over 39, 40 miles per hour, and it doesn't mean it's tropical in nature. Some other things go into that.
Right.
But hey, sensible weather. People are going to see rain, some gusty winds, and not quite as nice later this week.
I'm just really excited personally that we're going to be sharing this kind of forecasting long-range process with the folks that are joining us, because it peels the curtain back. And for me, I'm curious to hear the questions that will be asked. You and I have always done this internally, and I'll be really interested to hear these folks' thoughts while we're going through our work, and maybe that can give us ideas or new things, new ways to look at it. I'm just nerding out a little bit.
Yeah, and I think by the time we get to like Halloween and we have several different lows on the map, and then we'll have that kind of an idea starting to form, and then you get to the end of November, the end of hurricane season, and you have a few more on there. And then what we will do, and maybe sometime in December or January, we'll hop back on, kind of give some updated thoughts on what we're seeing once we start to get a recycle. But generally those lows start to tell the story, and then we kind of focus in, and probably the toughest part is putting a final number on things.
100%. So Terry's asking, no chance this low can turn into a tropical cyclone? We never said there was no chance. As a matter of fact, the National Hurricane Center is giving it a 30% chance of developing into a tropical cyclone. So yes, there is a chance, but that window of time is a relatively small window. So all we're saying is we have to keep watching it closely to see what it does in this narrow window of time. Lawrence is posting something on your page, Jeremy.
Oh, oops. I was going to share this on another one. So there we go. It did okay, perfect. So let's see here. Talking about Sherlock Holmes.
The reasoner can produce an effect which seems remarkable to his neighbor because the latter has missed one little point, which is the basis of the deduction. I mean, at the end of the day, opening this up gives everybody an opportunity to know the methodology and to ask us questions. And if those questions, to me, help us do more research we wouldn't have already done, it can only improve our forecast, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone will get to see kind of how we create this.
Yeah. So Mickey's asking on YouTube, could that low showing around the 25th, 26th be what Invest 92 now tracking westward and reaching the Caribbean?
I would say unlikely, just because we have so many fronts now that make it well offshore and pick these things up.
Yeah.
So probably not.
We're not into that main development region coming here time of year. Those fronts are now making it south. And so, Brad's asking, on average, how many miles different are these lows from where the hurricanes actually make landfall? That's a really good question.
Wait, what was that now?
So in other words, we're tracking the lows, watching the new cycle establish. Mm-hmm. On average, how many miles different are these lows from where the hurricanes actually make landfall when they go in the future? I think that's a really good question.
I would say we'll plot these, and then we'll look at the next cycle, and we try to find kind of an area that these lows want to be in.
Right. I'm trying to find, this is a 2021 product here. It's going to take it forever. I don't even know that it'll load. But Ada, Elsa, and Fred were all tied to the same part of the weather pattern, and they were a few miles off. Like I said, I don't know that this is actually going to work because the graphic may be broken. Of course it is. But it's, in some cases, it's been remarkable, 50 miles, 20 miles. Other cases, it'll be 100 miles. It just depends, it's kind of one of these things you have to understand the strengths and the weaknesses. It's not going to be perfect, but I remember there was a sea-named storm. It was Louisiana. There was a storm that hit, and then that next hurricane season, it was literally 20 miles away from where the original cycle happened. And I just remember thinking, like, that's stupid. Like, that's crazy
Right.
how accurate that was.
Yes. So, and that's why when we pick out these hot spots, they may run like maybe 1 or 200 miles or a little bit more than that. And it's kind of to adjust for that air either side of it. But I think we've done well with the hotspots since we've been doing this the last several years.
I mean, like, I think last year, didn't we have like a 76% or 74% accuracy rate? We had a 75%. No, last year was 100%. The year before was like a 76%. The year before that was like a 75%. Like, we have done very well. It's not going to be perfect, and there's some subjectivity that works into it, but I am very, very happy and stand by the products that we put out.
Yeah, and I think this year so far we've been, for the most part, 100%. Harold was down into South Texas, but that was kind of our secondary hotspot where we're like, not quite as confident, but we did have it highlighted. And then obviously we had Idalia, and then Ophelia moved into the Carolinas.
Right. So there's the other areas, and we had South Texas highlighted as an other area of interest. And then, we had the Idalia part of the pattern highlighted, and we had the Carolinas highlighted there for Ophelia as well. So I think we did pretty well. You know, we haven't gotten 100% of the storms that will be firing up because hurricane season continues. But I would say that so far, my feeling is that we're looking pretty good in terms of things.
Yeah, and if we end up getting one now, it's kind of in the new part of the pattern, so it's something we'll really focus on a hotspot for next year. But this one might actually fall into that panhandle area we had highlighted if it ends up being named. Might just be a depression or something like that.
Yeah, but it's definitely getting worked into next year's thing. Any other questions that anybody can have, Jeremy? Is there anything that we haven't mentioned that you'd like to mention?
No, I think we're good. We said a week ago that this one that we did today would be pretty obvious. If there was something in the Gulf, we'd be talking about it. And here we are.
Yep.
Potentially, we'll see if it's develops in the next probably 2 to 3 days. It'll bring some rain to our area. We have the system out in the eastern Atlantic, and maybe one of these will end up being Sean.
Yeah. If not, I'm okay with that too.
Yes.
All right. Very good. Okay. That's it. Yeah. You like?
I think that's it for now. And people can always, if they watch these later, I know sometimes I'll look back and there's new questions posted. Yeah. We'll try to head back in there and just answer you on Facebook. Sounds good. All right. So we'll see you all next Tuesday, 10 a.m. But for now, in not so sunny, but beautiful always, Central Florida, I'm West 2 meteorologist Eric Burris. And from WJCL 22 in Savannah, Georgia, I'm Chief Meteorologist Jeremy Nelson. We'll see y'all later.